Good morning, everyone. Welcome to ISQua's North America Community of Practice webinar. We'll get started momentarily. My name is Ulfat Sheikh, and I am the lead of the ISQua North America Community of Practice. We started our webinars last year in 2025, been going on for a whole year now. This year, we have a steering committee for ISQua's North America Community of Practice, and one of our speakers, Salab El Halou, is on the steering committee. So we're really excited to highlight some of his work. Let me go ahead and tell you a little bit about ISQua's other exciting offerings this year. And then before I introduce both our speakers, both our presenters for today. So the call for papers for ISQua's annual meeting coming up in Dublin later this year in September is February the 4th. So please go ahead to the ISQua portal and submit your abstracts there. We look forward to seeing you in person at the conference. Please stop by to say hello to me if you spot me there. So the conference is September 27th to 30th in Dublin. And then in 2027, we return to North America, to Vancouver in September 2027. Excited to meet our Canadian colleagues there, as well as all of you. For those of you relatively new to the ISQua community, you can join as a guest or as a member. As a guest, your registration is free and you have access to several of ISQua's resources. As a member, you get a free subscription to the ISQua's journal and reduced rates for the conferences and so much more. And so to launch into today's session, the title of the session is Transforming Safety Culture in Healthcare Teams. And to help illuminate this topic for us, I have just a short introduction that I'll do that just gets us all on the same page with respect to the vocabulary and also shares some of my thoughts on this before we launch into those of our speakers. So our two speakers today will be Dr. Salab El Halou and Dr. Peter Larkman. So Salab is a neonatologist and an associate professor at McMaster Children's Hospital in the Department of Pediatrics in the Division of Neonatology in Canada. And then joining Salab is Dr. Peter Larkman, who's a pediatrician and international leader in patient safety and quality improvement. I've known Peter for like a decade and a half now, and I've really greatly enjoyed our collaboration. And as mentioned, I am the chair of the ISQua North America Community of Practice Steering Committee. I'm a professor of pediatrics and the director for healthcare quality at the University of California, Davis Health System. And I'm also on the board of ISQua. I've had the privilege of serving on the board for a little over a year now. So to get us all on the same page, I just wanted to start off by defining a key aspect of the title of today's session, which is patient safety culture. And it's essentially the extent to which an organization's culture supports and promotes patient safety. It refers to our shared values, our beliefs and norms that influence actions and behaviors. And the origin dates back to when we started talking about what high reliability organizations mean and what they do in healthcare. And HROs or high reliability organizations minimize adverse events despite the complexities and the hazardous nature of our environments that we work in. So similar to healthcare, which is an HRO for sure. Some of the key features of high reliability organizations is that they acknowledge high risk activities. It's a blame-free environment for reporting errors. There's collaboration across ranks and commitment to resources to safety. And you can look at the ecosystem of patient safety culture, either at a unit, so ward or clinic level, or an organizational level, and then at a system level. So when we look at the framework of what a just culture means, that focuses on identifying errors and separating errors from gross negligence, we look at balancing learning and accountability. We address system level failures while maintaining zero tolerance for reckless behavior or complete negligence. We look at the power of psychological safety, where staff feel comfortable reporting errors and near misses without fear of retribution or blame. And we also look at categorizing simple human errors from at-risk shortcuts from intentional reckless acts. So Peter Larkman has spoken about incorporating patient safety and quality improvement into the DNA of healthcare workers, and I wanted to just share that before we, even think about doing that, some of these things need to be hardwired into a healthcare system. So our learners learn the right thing, and we don't unintentionally teach them about blaming and shaming or hiding medical errors. Consistently, globally, teamwork seems to emerge as an area where we've done well, but we still have a lot of gaps around punitive environments and staffing shortages, which are critical weaknesses globally when you look at papers that look at the global issues around patient safety culture. We are still, even though we say we acknowledge that errors occur and we need to have a just culture, there is still this hidden culture. So official policy might say safety first, but the hidden culture in many healthcare teams is still don't get into trouble. And one of the issues with this is that when an error occurs, there's fear of reprimand, there's silence and non-reporting. You actually lose what you have to learn from. So there's loss of learning data, and whatever issues cause that error persist. And so I think the paradigm shift we are all talking about, and we're trying so hard to reach for a decade now, is focusing on learning and not individual blame, and talking about this other concept that you'll hear about called psychological safety, where it's the degree to which employees feel respected and comfortable speaking, raising ideas without fear. I wanted to end my part by telling you a little bit about the hospital patient safety culture survey that's done in the United States. These are the latest findings from the 2024 database. The results are released every 2 years. So this is the last one I could get a hold of. It had 445 participating hospitals in the US, over 200,000 providers and staff, and a 52% response rate. This safety culture is ideally given annually to staff and determines behaviors that are rewarded, supported, accepted, and expected. And it exists at multiple levels: system, hospital, department, and unit. And when you look at the results of this latest survey results that were released, we actually did pretty decently on teamwork and supervisor, manager, and clinical leader support for patient safety, but had the lowest results in terms of units response and leadership response to errors, where there's fair treatment and a focus on learning from mistakes. And then definitely persisting issues around staff and workforce space, where there's increased staff workload, staff feel rushed, and there's an inappropriate reliance on temporary staff or float staff. And so, again, when you look at comparative results from 2021 to 2024, there has been an increase in communication of errors, but there have been continuing problems and actually worsening problems in with respect to staffing shortages and workplace. So I'd like to end with saying that I strongly feel that understaffing, in addition to obviously causing burnout among healthcare staff that are a precious resource, causes at-risk behaviors or shortcuts and decreased safety perception. And so from our two speakers today, we'll have Salab starting off with some work that he and his team have done in this area. And then I'm going to have Peter Larkman reflect on his work using some of the concepts that I introduced: psychological safety, some of the reporting successes we've had, but still persisting issues around workforce shortages and how we might alleviate some of that. And then we'll end with question and answers. So if you could put your questions or comments in the Q&A section of Zoom, I will keep scanning that and make sure that I bring those up for you. So Sulab, you have the stage now. Go ahead and share your slides.
Let me quickly do that.
While Salhab's doing that, I can just say, for those in the US who come into Dublin, the nice thing about it is that when you leave Dublin, you land in domestic when you get home, because the border is in Dublin. So come to Dublin. That's really worthwhile in September. Over to you, Salhab.
Can you see my slides and can you hear me?
Yeah.
Ulfa, thank you very, very much. What a pleasure and honor to be here, also to co-present with you guys and with Peter, who I'm so grateful to be able to call my mentor. And I'm deeply humbled. I followed the text where all the people are from who are listening and hopefully chiming in the discussion later. I'm deeply humbled to be here. So thank you very, very much. What I'll talk about is about the work we're trying to do, I must say, transforming safety culture in healthcare teams. I love this quote by Francisco Varela, if you had the chance to read it. But I want to start, well, now I need to see how I can advance those. Here we go. I want to start that I take the time to recognize that we are on the traditional territory, that I am on the traditional territory shared between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Anishinaabe Nations, which was acknowledged in a dish with one spoon wampum belt. That wampum uses the symbolism of a dish to represent the territory, and one spoon to represent that the people are to share the resources of the land and only take what they need. For those who are not familiar with land acknowledgement, this is in the sense of indigenous reconciliation, because we're sitting on indigenous land here in North America, and this is where I sit at the moment. So the objectives of today is describing a safety culture in an intensive care unit setting. It's actually a neonatal intensive care unit. Learn a bit about the role of co-production in developing the safety culture, and a little bit to talk about how can we sustain teamwork in healthcare teams. I have nothing to disclose other than I really present teamwork and a lot of work of others who are actually also joining, humbling as well. Thanks for joining, guys. Um, so let me start to talk a little bit about the safety culture program we're trying to achieve in our unit. So a while ago, the National Patient Safety Agency, the NPSA, which has been dismantled, unfortunately, what I'm hearing, so many things are being dismantled at the moment, but they came up with the 7 steps to patient safety, which is an excellent framework. And step one, before anything else, is build a safety culture. And defined as a safety culture is where staff have a constant and active awareness of the potential for things to go wrong. I would add, we also need to have an awareness of those things which go well, because we can build on those as well. Also, a culture that is open and fair, and one that encourages people to speak up about mistakes. And what do we need to enact safety culture? Um, Mainly effective interpersonal processes. This is all about relationships and interpersonal processes, team training, relational coordination, problem-solving communication as relational coordination, a combination of multiple interventions, and mindful organizing of high reliability processes. Ulfat, you explained a bit about the high reliability practices which have been published, and we know about them. But if we don't use them within a state of mindfulness, then we don't get to that high reliability and that exceptionally safe, consistently high quality of care. And when we're talking about state of mindfulness, leading a little bit to co-production, which I'll come to later, how can we be in a state of mindfulness if we're not including those who are the most important people within any kind of project and within our healthcare, who are the patients and the parents in our case of NICU. So do safety culture interventions help? Yes, as you said, Ulfa, they reduce severity of incidents, they decreased hospital harms and serious safety events, and safety culture interventions and safety culture correlates with improved outcomes. So let's get a bit to our experience in the NICU. When we wanted to build that program, we were thinking, okay, what is that based on? What are we working with? IHI has a beautiful patient safety framework, which puts engagement of patients and family into the center, which is very, very important, and focuses on culture and on learning system. That's exactly how we understand what we need to do. And there are very key words in here like leadership, psychological safety, teamwork and communication, and so on, improvement and measurement. So an excellent framework which really guided us how to build up our program. What is very important is that you work, whatever you do as a program, you work in a local context. So one thing is, it needs to be within the work needs to be within the strategy of your organization or of your corporation or whatever you work with. And our organization, from a hospital perspective, is Hamilton Health Sciences, with the pillars patients, people, sustainability, research, innovation, and learning. And you don't need to read the next slide, but we're doing a lot of work related to the patient pillar in our unit. So there's tons of work about patient safety and quality improvement for our little patients, for our neonatology. I'm a neonatologist working on a 72-bed unit. But what we were focusing on is on the people pillar with that program I want to suggest, or I want to talk about. And when we look at the aspirational themes of the people pillar, how they call it in the strategy of HHS, of Hamilton Health Sciences, we take care of ourselves, we're better as a team, and we're engaged, enabled, and empowered as leading principles. And when you look at the supporting enablers, they want to see wellness and safety, diversity and inclusion, and communication play an important role in our organizational strategy. So that and many other inputs, as well as the input we got from local surveys, for instance. There was a survey about equity, diversity, and inclusion, for instance, which was very telling about for us. So we always need to look in the local context what we're dealing with, and that led to this safety culture program, which we've recently published, and where we wanted to have a measurable aim, smart aim, how we call it, and we want to improve the safety culture on our 72-bed unit in a certain way. I'll come to that in a second, with a QI project, including transactional and transformational projects within 5 years. So that started in 2018. COVID came, and there was a lot of backlash and difficulties in putting anything into place during COVID. So those 5 years obviously were ambitious. We want to measure the safety culture, and it says here, from bureaucratic to generative, with the MAPSAF, with the Manchester Patient Safety Framework. That's a framework which measures safety cultures, teaches about safety culture, and we actually started somewhere, and Peter will probably allude to this, but this measures the level of maturity with respect to safety culture of an organization as a team, and emphasizes how important it is to be proactive and generative. What I'm preaching to the choir here, Peter, is the expert to this. So Peter, please chime in.
Yeah, so when I was in Hamilton in 2018, just before 2019, just before COVID, I met Stelhub, and he started talking about the safety program, and I said, well, you have to measure the culture. And Olpat gave you the yearly assessment, and I said, well, that's really not good enough. You have to use something that can tell the teams how they perceive culture, rather than give them something that they do otherwise, and do a national survey. And the MAPSAP, which was developed by James Reason in Manchester, that's what's Manchester Patient Safety Scale, and was done for I think it was done for in the oil industry originally. And it has these 5 levels, and you can see these 5 levels from pathological to generative. So say generative is where safety is your business. And so the airlines mostly, in the high reliability organizations, nuclear power and so on, that's where they are. Proactive is where you really would like to be, most people would like to be, and you're predicting. But most of us are in B and C. Something when you have an incident, a lot happens. Suddenly a lot of resources turn up and you do it. A lot of organizations count a lot. They do a lot of counting, and that's where they are in the bureaucratic. That's why it's called bureaucratic. It's where most organizations, they have systems in place to identify the hazards, they have risk registers, they do a root cause analysis, they do lots of that, but they're looking backwards rather than forwards. And so the beauty of this is that it's on 2 levels. You do it firstly for where you are as a team and where you think your organization is. And the idea is that over time, when you start your program, we start doing it. So in the programs that I run in the UK and Ireland, on the situation awareness for everyone program, what we do is we give you clinical teams and say, you can tell us where you are. There are 9 dimensions, how the team's working, how the organization's working, how they're learning. And we say how they communicate, how they work, interact with each other. So there are 9 dimensions that go down the one side. And then there's these 5 areas where they mark themselves. And let's see, where are they working as a team? And the team, and this is what I say to Salah, see where your team is working. And then you can see the areas that you have to focus on. And it's usually the areas to focus on leadership, communication, and how you manage risk, how you respond to things. So it's a very neat way of doing it. And what happens is it's not something that you're comparing yourself to someone else. You're comparing yourself to yourself. And they do this on a regular basis. And the members of the team may change, because if a new person comes in, they will see where they are because they can see the change. So the idea is to go up the ladder. And we normally find that the more senior people like to think they're in D and E, but the more whole-faith people usually see they're in B and C. And rarely we see A. That's the really pathological organization that we see it in A. So this is a really good tool to do it, and we can give you the link in the chat. I will just go into the link. Unfortunately, you've got to search for it now, but it's a really useful tool to use for patient safety culture, rather than the ones by ARC. I think those are really good, but this is one where teams can really get to the nitty-gritty of patient safety culture. Over to you, Sahal.
Peter, thank you so much. And yeah, you were right. We were starting in C. During COVID, it didn't get better. Now we are in a severe staffing crisis, and waiting for the next MAPSAF workshop, and very curious where we are. So yes, I fully agree that probably most are in B or in C. So the 6 domains and primary drivers we chose out of all the information we got of our program was psychological safety, well-being, teamwork and communication, understanding ourselves as a learning system or a complex adaptive system, leadership, and equity, diversity, and inclusion, and cultural safety. The timeline, you need to assess, we needed definitely to assess what do we need at that moment. We started before that project with the clinical microsystems because we were such a big unit. And then starting with some transactional project, what is really needed at the moment, and then at some point coming to a transformational project to really transform culture, which, as I said, becomes very, very difficult to implement this in crisis situations where you reactively try to solve the crisis, put out the fires, and so on and so on. So as an example for a transactional project, we had a revision of our existing semi-electronic medical record charting system, which was awful and really was working against workflow somehow. And we revised that there was an interdisciplinary group, fantastic group, revising that and leading to an improvement of the medical record charting system, what we had. And then it was changed to, the whole organization changed over to an electronic medical record charting, EPIC, which the most people know and have. But how we configured EPIC was very much informed by this project as well. So that was a very powerful project to do. What we also did was a workflow project, it was a multi-method project, time motion study, many things were put in there to see how is our workflow of the medical personnel. And we were at that point focusing on the medical personnel on the unit, and we could actually compare that between before EPIC and after EPIC. So after the electronic medical record charting was implemented, what were the changes or not the changes? What was improving? And what was the main change for the individuals? We had some interviews. So an interesting documentation project and a very powerful or impactful documentation project in the first place. What we also did was looking at the IHI framework for joy in work. Then we're now moving towards transactional, but also transformational project. We had piloted that we had an interdisciplinary group of people attending the joy in work workshop from IHI, but we also implemented a project which was focusing on the fellows. This was coming from our neonatal perinatal fellowship program, to look that we can decrease burnout, which at that time was assessed with 80% of the fellows feeling burnout, to decrease that to 50% or less. We actually were successful with some transactional projects about power of the work they had. So handover was changed, timing of handover, scheduling was changed, and we could improve the sense of control, we could improve the burnout, and we could improve the feeling of psychological safety. In a consecutive assessment, workload, control of workload went down again a little. Burnout, I am sure now, is higher than 80% with the staffing crisis we're currently in. The feeling of psychological safety actually remained the same and remained that high because individuals knew we were working on this, and we had some sustainability measures like regular town halls and so on in place where we have a permanent dialogue with this group. We also implemented an EDI workshop as a transformational project. I won't go into detail of what was taught during that EDI workshop. We piloted it with about 50, 60 people, interdisciplinary throughout all disciplines. It was a 4 afternoon, 1.5 hours each workshop about those topics which I present here. Here again, the sustainability is the question. How do you keep that EDI workshop piloted once in the curriculum going forward? So that needs to be embedded in the organizational structure and is currently being embedded in the culture working group we have from an organizational perspective. Coming to teamwork and team development interventions, team development interventions have shown that they increase team competencies and can lead to improvement in outcomes. Challenging, again, is the measuring of safety culture. How do you measure all this? But we talked about this. When you look at NICU safety culture and teamwork climate, that varies very much across NICUs. And it seems that system-wide generalized training may support teamwork within NICUs to a greater extent than just task-specific training. What I think is important to have systems approach and system-wide generalized training in a clinical context and a clinical content, and we'll come to that. So when we look at the team training interventions, team training, team building, debriefing, and leadership training, our project is actually focusing on team building and team training. And that leads me to co-production within this project. So our project is called Team Development Interventions for Empowering Parents in Preventing Infection and Improving Hand Hygiene in the NICU. I love the title TDI Epiphany. It's built on co-production with parents. It puts into the center team development interventions. It's a multi-method project. And we hypothesize that TDIs involving both caregivers and healthcare workers will enhance the culture of co-production in the NICU. TDIs in healthcare have mainly been used for healthcare workers. The innovative aspect is here to really include the parents and have the parents leading together with healthcare workers on those TDIs. And also we think that this will strengthen parental leadership and engagement in promoting hand hygiene practices. We want to apply that TDI approach, and the context is hand hygiene. It's not so much in the focus is the TDIs, and the context is the hand hygiene. So there's different steps we're going through. We built already a team and established a steering committee ensuring equity, diversity, and inclusion. We need to do an assessment and see what is it, what we need, what is needed for engagement and change, and we need a needs assessment to inform what are we building in terms of hand hygiene toolkit and educational material. This will then be developed together collaboratively with simulation pieces, virtual methods that everybody gets access to educational material and so on. And we will test, don't want to go too much into detail because we don't have the time, and we will test this and evaluate this, how this works, the implementation, and in future studies, then obviously more outcomes are going to be evaluated in this context. I want to talk a little bit about co-production in this context. So in neonatology, I can talk about the Canadian experience. We have a very strong parent voice. We have the Canadian Premature Baby Foundation, which is a parent-led foundation working very closely together with our Canadian Neonatal Network, with the CNN. So we have a strong culture of parent engagement and parent voice for quite a few years now. And we have a local culture of parent engagement. In our pediatric hospital, we have a Pediatric Family Advisory Council, and we have parent partners in our NICU for many years now. What we also have, what our university offers together with CanChild, with a research institute, is a course of family engagement in research. So families, parents, patients, um, and faculty and academics can together take this course and become knowledgeable about family engagement in research and capable and confident to partner on research projects, which I think is an amazing thing. And our parent partners, who I depict here, our parent partners mainly have taken that course. And our parent partners in this TDI Epiphany project have been part of the development from the beginning, grant applications, protocol, everything. The parent partners are co-leading. They're part of our steering committee. There will be throughout the entire project implementation, evaluation, sustainability. Everything will be led by a steering committee where 3 out of 6 or 7 people are parents. And what is very important, that you also work with those parents throughout this project, so focus groups, and so on and so on, that we will have changing parent partners as subjects within this project together with us and with the healthcare workers. So co-produced from the ground up. Important is to use co-production frameworks which guide you what to do. The main one most people know when they deal with co-production is from the Institute for Patient and Family-Centered Care. We use certain frameworks which are very similar. We use the Canadian one, the ISQua from the Canadian Institute of Health Research, which is very similar to IPFCC. And we knew a local one, the McMaster framework. But I also want to emphasize team steps, which many people know in terms of teamwork 3.0 now actually includes parents or patients into the teamwork. They haven't changed their evaluation and score sheets and anything yet, but it is part of team steps and part of the objectives of team steps to use to apply it also to parents, and that's why we can use it in this context. So when you look at sustainability, I feel co-production involving parents or patients is one main pillar of sustainability. If you have a framework which you can, where it's clear that the parents and patients are always engaged in whatever you do, then I think this is actually quite a control mechanism, I would say, almost quality assurance for sustainability. We need to use the existing resources. For instance, we have yearly education days where we can include the education we want to do around those projects. We need to have access for every partner, for every patient or whatever, equitable and accessible, because different languages, that everybody from every socioeconomic status has, for instance, talking about those education material for hand hygiene, that everybody has it accessible and so on. You need to look at this following the EDI principles, and you need to apply methodology which helps you in sustainability. So for instance, continuous quality improvement methodology, we have daily CQI huddles, how we call it, whatever you want to measure and as a watch indicator and might become important for the unit, you can watch every day and with metrics and discuss that every day. So there are methodologies out there which help you with sustainability, as for instance also systems engineering principle, SEEPS 3.0. So choose the methodology which is conducive of sustainability. So that brings me basically to the end and to the take-home messages, that the QI program should align with organizational strategy, and we need to assess what the local needs are when we do any kind of program. That safety culture interventions can improve outcomes, should include transactional and transformational projects, and should consider that we are a learning system and change over time. And our driver diagram, for instance, has changed a lot since we started in 2018. Co-production needs to be an integral part of culture, should be integral to a safety culture program, and facilitate sustainability. and choose the methodology which enables that sustainability. That's basically what I had in that short little presentation. And thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Salam. So at this point, I'm scrolling through the many questions we have. I wanted to ask Peter if he wanted to very briefly reflect on Salab's comments for just a couple of minutes, and after that, I will share the questions with Peter and Salab to address.
Yeah, so thanks for a great presentation, Salab. And what you were really showing is the complexity of safety culture. So when we started this program, when you started the program, you started measuring your culture on a regular basis using the MapSat. You saw that you were in the counting zone, and that's where most people are. They're counting what's happening, the number of adverse events. They're reporting that up. They're having root cause analyses. And this is the way patient safety started, unfortunately. I call it the rabbit hole. Some of them might have heard me on there. There's a lot of Canadians on today. And the last week I was in Canada speaking for Healthcare Excellence Canada. And one thing I said is that we went down this rabbit hole. And the rabbit hole was looking at past events and really looking at what you do in a bureaucratic organization. Whereas now we're really looking at an organization in which there is a high culture. It's where people say this safety is our business. And that's what I like about the MapSat, is that it's where you're thinking about safety every day. Every action's about safety. And that when we do get pandemics like you got, and you were moving to that maturity, it doesn't hit your course because safety is your business. And you can see that in other industries, when they take their eye off the ball of safety, then they become unsafe. And we can just go to aviation. I really speak about aviation because we take aviation for granted now. It wasn't always safe. And because safety rods became their business, and suddenly Boeing took their eye off the ball, and we had the scandals with the Boeing Max. And that's because safety wasn't their business, then the bottom line was their business. And so that's the problem. And there is a question in the chat about what leaders should do, because this is very important. We have to talk about safety every day. And that's the key thing that it becomes is if I had to say to Sahab, what's your job? You'll maybe say, I don't know, what is your job, Sahab? You're a leader and neonatologist, that's right?
Yeah, so my job as the leader of the division, I'm at the moment the academic division head, and holding a chair for quality improvement and patient safety is get those, basically in one sentence, to get those projects going. And the one thing is upstream, that you really make sure that you are within the organizational strategy and really make those politics, if I might say so, and make sure that resources, for instance, can be provided and so on.
And on a clinical level, what's your role at the clinical level?
Pardon me?
What's your clinical role?
My clinical role that's a while ago. I also was the medical director of that unit, which I'm not anymore. So my clinical role is to be a senior neonatologist. But it's
and as a senior neonatologist, what's your role? I'm really pushing. I want to teach a point here. So, as a senior neonatologist, what's your role?
My role is first to care for the patients. Second, to make sure that the system is conducive of caring for patients and make it safer every day, right? So
I turn that around. Your clinical role as a neonatologist, and this is where I'm talking about the genome that we spoke earlier. Your job as a neonatologist is to keep those babies safe while you're looking after them. Now, I don't know how many people on the call are neonatologists, but neonatal care is very much like being in a cockpit. You have this very small baby surrounded by all this machinery, and anything can go wrong at any time. So it's a very highly prone to unreliability. And it requires a lot of human factors, how things are designed, how people work, how the team works around it. So that's why all the things that Salhab was talking about, the importance of teamwork. And you could use, I don't read about which framework you did to practice the teams, But in organizations that are very, very safe, they are working on teamwork all the time. So when you go to these high reliability organizations, no matter whether they're full staff or not full staff, they're working on getting that team to work well. And so whether you've got firefighters, the army, or the Air Force, they're working on teams. And I don't want to use the word high reliability organizations because they're very few in healthcare, but an organization that is safe, has got the clinical teams at the microsystem level continually working on their own safety culture. And you add all these building blocks together, then you get a safe organization. So it's bottom up. And of course, the key thing that you've added, very important at the end, which we're learning right now, is that it has to include the patients. In your case, not the babies, but the parents. But in adult care, the parents, the families, and the patients. And as a child, as a pediatrician, as they get older, the child as well in their safety. And just to say, one of the things that we did at Great Ormond Street is we had the parents and the child, as soon as they were old enough, to mark us on safety every day in this one model we were testing out. So they could say, yes, I noticed these unsafe acts and these things happened. And that we co-produced that with parents. So they'd mark it every day. So safety becomes what you do every day. It becomes what you think about every day, because actually healthcare, because of what we have done and how successful we were, has become incredibly unsafe. So I hate it gives you my age. When I trained as a neonatologist, there was no surfactant and babies used to die. And we used to be like at 1 kilo, we used to say no ventilation because there was no surfactant, the babies were going to die. And then along came surfactant and the babies could live. And now people know that in a neonatal unit like yours, a baby of 250, 300 grams is ventilated. And you're ventilating these babies for 3 months. And there are so many things that could go wrong from a safety perspective. And so safety's got to be in your mind the whole time. How am I keeping this baby safe? Not how am I treating the ventilating, but how am I ventilating safely? Can you see what I'm getting at? And now how do we get that into the genome of the healthcare workers in the unit? And you'll find that by doing that, it starts with the leaders. The leaders are talking about safety every day. That's what they talk about. They say, what are the risks today so we can prevent harm? Who's the baby that's most at risk of harm today? And I'd say the same if I was in the care of the elderly. I often compare neonates with the very care of the elderly because of two extremes of life. They have the same problems in many ways. Children and elderly have the same problems. The highest risk group in patient safety are the very young and the very old. And so the whole thing is every day people are saying, what are the safety risks today? What are the risks? So that's the one element. The second element, I'm giving 3 elements of comments on your presentation. So that's the one of building your team and building a safe team. And you've been doing that. So that's really great. They haven't moved. You had COVID and you've had staff shortages, which are big issues to address with. The second very important area is on co-producing, as you said. Co-producing solutions with 2 people, 2 groups. One with the team. How can we be safer? And the second one is with the parents and with the patients, if you know, healthcare elderly. And the third area is the very important thing about looking after the well-being of the staff and asking them how they are, how do they feel, what they're looking at. It's really amazing that the more you focus on the well-being of the staff, because if you have well-being of staff, it's been shown that you have better outcomes. So those 3 big elements come from your program. And I think that the fact that you're having difficulties is not because it's not working. It's because it's very complex to do and takes time. But I'm interested to see how you're moving up, because on that Manchester scale, on the 9 dimensions, and I put them all in the chat, and you can look at the dimensions, you'll see that on some of them, you've moved from C to D. Others have been stuck. And what the team needs to do when you look at these dimensions, they discuss how can we move. And this is the co-production. That's why I like the Manchester Patient Safety Scale, for it allows teams to identify where they need to work on and allows leaders to take action. So that's my feedback on your program, which is really impressive. And I've been very pleased that I've been part of advising you. Thanks very much. Over to you, Ulfat.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for those reflections, Peter. We have many, many questions in that came in. Let me try to see if I can get us started here. There's a question from Sarah Cutler, which says, I've heard that some organizations are moving away from modeling their safety programs around the principles of high reliability organizations, specifically around leaders rounding to influence or finding or fixing problems, and are instead moving toward methods that encourage leaders to lean in with curiosity, build trust, where their staff can honestly talk about risks and how work is actually done. So you've, brought this up in these comments that you just went through, but Sarah wanted to see if, what your specific thoughts were around this leadership shift.
Peter, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I'll say that's a great question, because high reliability is an aspiration, but it's an aspiration. I mean, they describe it in other industries and they say you should do it, but you have got high reliability parts of your organization already, and you've got to go and look at what they do. So if you go have radiotherapy, that's high reliability. Blood transfusion, high reliability. If you go to hematology and people are working for looking at hemophilia patients, high reliability. Nephrology in dialysis, high reliability. They're good units. So it's like a smorgasbord that some parts of your acute care have got high reliability. And people might say, well, that's because you can control the patients, but that's because they've really practiced. They're really practiced. And just in my experience of radiotherapy, my own personal experience, I was amazed that no matter what team I had, they did the same thing. No matter what team I had, they did the same thing. They never changed. No matter short-staffed, rushed or not, nothing changed. They all kept to it, and there was high reliability in action. And I said, how could that happen? Well, they practice, they simulate, they look at human factors, they understand, and safety is what they do. Why do they do it? Because they know the risk factors. And so, yeah, so Sarah, I think that when the doctors, the leaders rounding, if the leaders haven't changed their mindset, then there's no point in rounding, because then it becomes an inspection. And as soon as the workers know that this is an inspection, then it's not going to work. And I can tell you, I did in Ireland, I helped develop the walk-around protocol for the HSE, the Health Service Executive. And the first thing when I trained the leaders, I said, you've got to change your mindset. You walking in, you're not inspecting. That's another time you come. This time, you're listening, and listening is curious. What's it like to be in the front line? Tell me about it. What are the things that keep you awake at night? I'm not here to solve the problems. I'm here to listen and hear what it's like, the lived experience of being a healthcare worker. And then they come safer. So yeah, a great question.
If I may
Next
add,
question is, I'm sorry, go ahead, Salhan.
Very briefly, I would completely agree, and I think the leader needs to empower people. It needs to show themselves to empower people to ask the right question and ask the people, hey, what can I do for you? What is it what you need for support? and get the input. The walkarounds to tell what has to happen don't work. That is, I fully agree.
Great. And then this second question here is from Akbar, and actually, I think it's about, the timeline for starting where organizations are on this journey. So the question says that the 7-step framework listed, the Salab showed establishing a culture of safety as the first step. With the amount of time it takes for culture to be established, aren't we trying to start from the middle, if not the end, to really having a culture of safety? So I guess the question deals with, the various timelines based on where you are. Any comments there?
But let me tell you, when they did the 7 steps, it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's a circle. And you say, where are we starting?
Yeah.
And of course, I would change it because I wouldn't have culture as part of the 7 steps. I'd say culture surrounding the 6 steps. The cultures are surrounding things. So it's really not to say you have to have safety culture before you can do the risk management, before you can do the teamwork, it's not that. Safety culture is enveloping everything. And it's going to grow. And what they're saying is when you do the 6 steps, you'll get the safety culture. So you're right, it's not the first step, it's the encompassing step of everything and the outcome that you want to get.
That's a bit reflective of the people and patient pillar and the other pillars of the strategy, right? So we are building the culture on the people pillar, but all the patient things, which are addressing the other steps as well, are done at the same time. Yeah, so absolutely.
Omar mentions that the question here is, was simulation involved in any part of this project, like testing epic processes on simulated cases? And then it's a 2-part question. The second part is, how did frontline staff contribute to the initiatives and access the educational session? Were these online, in person? Was there specific funding to allow staff to attend?
Does that question, fantastic question, does that question refer to the implementation of the electronic medical record charting? Then the answer is yes. So simulation, let me put it that way. Simulation is involved in both. In the TDI Epiphany project, yes, there's a lot of simulation involved there. There will be mock situations, they will be videotaped, and so the answer is yes. In EPIC, we had a lot of education around this. That was partly virtual, but also in person on computers, and there was tons of funding around this because that was a big HHS, many hundred millions project to implement this. This was a more than 1 year project until that was implemented. In our little project in our NICU, this was a interdisciplinary group. There were all groups involved from nursing, medical frontline attendings or consultants, how you call it. So that was an interdisciplinary group working on this, and we're mocking and testing many of those templates. Yes. I hope that answered the question.
Yep, you did. So the next question generally is about leadership structure. So Adele says hospital leadership often becomes absorbed in routine operational tasks such as staffing and supplies, which can result in weak leadership around safety. From your experience in practicing a strong safety culture, who typically leads such initiatives within hospitals? How's the hospital quality and safety structure organized? And in what ways does the structure effectively reach and coordinate with frontline providers? So your general thoughts around hospital organizational structures that work for you.
Peter.
So I really don't like it when you're the director of safety or department of safety or part of risk management. It's part of what everyone should do. Of course, you have to have someone who takes the lead to do it. But it starts right at the top, is that everyone should be interested. I often say, I give an example when I'm teaching. I say that if you're in a hotel and Madonna comes to stay and you're the manager, you know that she's in the hotel. And so the CEO should know who the sickest patient is that day and what has to be done and how resources have to be given. So if safety is your business, you'll be talking about safety every day. The finance director will be talking, how do we spend money the best way to keep the patient safe? The nursing director will be constantly wondering, how can we keep our workers safe in order to keep the patients safe? The clinical and medical directors will be thinking about that too. So they'll be talking about safety all the time. And we'll be educating for safety. We'll be making sure the clinical teams. And I think that it's really the going down the route of adverse event management and risk management is not the way we should have gone. It was the way we started, but we should be really proactively thinking about who is going to be at most risk next, so we can mitigate it. And I refer you to the paper by Vincent and Elmer Bertie, which is about managing risk, is what patient safety is about. Proactive managing risk. There'll always be risk. If we don't want risk, don't admit the patients, then you don't have risk. But we're always going to have risk. Surgeons are always going to have risk when they do operations. And the more complex the patient, the more risk there is. But how are we going to manage that? How are we going to do it? We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk ahead. We're going to look at hierarchies. We're going to know when the hierarchies are flattened. We're going to build our teams. We're going to work on it. Now, we mentioned about the high reliability organizations. In those organizations, they spend a fortune of their time on building their teams and simulating and practicing. Human factors becomes part of what we do. Not if we're experts, but how we work. We're always considering those factors. So I think that it's important for us to reconsider what patient safety is about, and not only think about it as managing risk retrospectively, but really thinking about it prospectively, constantly thinking what's going to happen. And that's what they're doing in Hamilton. They're starting to think about this. And the co-production part is including the patients, including the parents, in that case, the parents, in saying, well, how can we be safer? And making this a continuum of working together. And I'm working with Paul Batalden, Julie Johnson, and Christian van Klessen on deciding what is a service and a product. And I think that what we've had is that patient safety was a product, not a service. It needs to be a service in which we're working and providing something that is more than just doing a falls program, a VTE program. We're looking at what is the experience of the healthcare provider and the patient.
Great. And so we are almost at the end of the hour, but I wanted to squeeze one last question in because I'm interested in the answer to that as well before we wrap up this session. So Mohammed Usama says that they work in the administration of a hospital where staff turnover and rotating trainees are common. So how can quality improvement initiatives in the NICU be sustained over time, given this rotation in trainees and workers? And I work in a teaching hospital as well, so I'm curious to see what your answer is.
I've got a quick answer. You wouldn't design the system the way we have had it. The fact, who would organize a system where all the trainees change on one day?
Horrible.
I mean, who on earth designed that system? Who designs a system that when the sickest people come in, the most experienced people go home? That's what we've designed. And we have to really think differently on our education, the way we rotate our clinical staff. So it's quite easy to do. So how many fellows do you have? How many residents?
So we're mainly based on fellows, and we have between 10 and 12 fellows.
And did they all change at the same time?
We have now started to try to not change them at the same time. And then it's the question, how do you educate them when they're there? So it comes to those sustainability measures, how you can slowly change that system, that you get more consistency and that you get sustainability. And what I said, education or the academic system needs to align more with the healthcare providing system, with the hospital system, and we need to align this this more
Yeah.
in our North American way of working, because we have academic part, educational part, who is actually doing a lot of the medical care. So that needs to be aligned in a better way. I agree, Peter.
Yeah, and so the answer to your thought is that we have to really think about redesign here. But I want a quick advert. Can I do a quick advert? Because if you see my graphic behind me, it's for World Patient Safety Day and the patient safety goals that you should all download. And we're having a webinar on the 6th of March to do goal number 1, which is engaging patient safety, parents and children in patient safety. And the speakers are Helen Haskell, is my key speaker. So everyone knows Helen, she's very well known. And I urge you, we'll be launching it tomorrow, I think the next day. So watch my plans and attend that webinar, because it'll be really great. Anyway, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And so I'd like to thank both our speakers, Salav and Peter, for their comments and sharing their experience. And just wanted to wrap up this webinar with a reminder to all our attendees that the call for papers for the September ISQua conference this year closes on February the 4th. So to please log into the ISQua portal and submit your abstracts. And so the ISQua conference is on 27th to 30th September in Dublin, and next year's conference is in Vancouver, Canada. So we do have these webinars for the ISQua North America of Community Practice monthly or so. And so we look forward to seeing you at future webinars, and please stay in touch. Thank you so much.
And just I'm putting the one reference that someone's asked for Vincent Almaberti into the chat, just in the last thing, so people can get it.
Okay, I'll just wait till you put that in before I close.
There it goes. In the chat, if someone wants to take it, there it is. Thanks very much, and have a great evening, day, or wherever you are.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.